Welcome back to another amazing episode of Medshield Movement Connect show with me, Dr. Fez. Now, it is the holiday time and schools have closed, which means the kids are running around, they're wanting to do a whole bunch of things, partying, and we need to make sure that we keep them safe. Which is why we've brought in somebody who has a bastion of knowledge when it comes to child safety, Christy Herselman. Get ready to know what you don't know about being body brilliant. This is the Medshield Movement Connect show, where we connect the dots between fitness, health, wellness, nutrition, and of course you. Hosted by me, Dr. Fez Mkhize, and a special guest that we have every month, sharing knowledge, insights, and groundbreaking tips on how to get fitter, be stronger, and live healthier. Turn up the volume and listen close. Today you amplify. It's the Medshield Movement Connect show. Let's go. Thank you so much for sitting down with us, Christy.
Such a pleasure.
Wonderful
to be here.
Thank you. It's so interesting that we're speaking about child safety because we live in a time where there's so many shifts. We're talking about safety not just in the physical sense, but also technologically. It's become a hot topic. How does one move in the landscape we have here today? But before we even get into that, how did you get involved with child safety?
So my background is in journalism and in education, and I started to see that there was this massive disconnect between where parents thought their kids were unsafe and where they were actually unsafe. And there was kind of this focus on, okay, my kids are safe at home by themselves with their iPhone, and they're unsafe on the street playing soccer. Where statistically we actually see that they're safer on the street than they are on their phone.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I will say I haven't thought about it in that way because, again, I'm not saying I'm that old, but I come from that time where it was come home at a certain time, sun must be out, who you're going with. Like, there's all of this information around where you're going to be and who you're going to be interacting in the physical sense. But you actually find that the statistics are finding that they're far unsafer virtually. Yeah,
because remember, so what you're saying is you were allowed out. You were allowed out to play with your friends. But this generation, parents are going, we don't even want you out because... You know, there's all those series and stuff that happen, like Madeleine McKay, and and moms have this kind of that could be my kid, and so there's kind of this unrealistic fear. I'm not saying we shouldn't be unwise with taking care of our kids, but what I'm seeing is that kids are walking through that digital door, closing it behind them, and parents are not knowing what's going on the other side.
It's very true, and I do find that with the shifting of that technological world, it's also something that parents aren't familiar with. And it's a space that maybe they don't quite know where the pitfalls are, I'm assuming, from your engagement with other parents.
Definitely. I always say that the Gen Zs are our guinea pig generation because they were the ones, you know, the millennials kind of had flip phones in high school, maybe Facebook in university or something like that. But our Gen Zs, they are growing up with social media. But they were the ones whose parents gave it to them unknowing of what was on it.
True.
And so they were engaging in all these spaces. They had this access to all this information. And I feel like parents kind of knew something was going on. A little bit of a worry in the pit of your stomach as, is my child safe? But not knowing.
Yeah.
And it's not that those parents didn't care about their kids. It was that they were kind of unaware of the dangers that existed online.
Of course. And I feel, I mean, as a parent yourself, would you tell me how you went from journalism, being somebody who's clearly quite inquisitive, wants to know the answers to things, and then finding yourself in this space where that connection came from? Did something happen? Did you find that you came across information that showed you that this was becoming something that was very much an issue within the South African or the global landscape?
So it actually started with a conversation at a birthday party when my daughter was 6. And a mom asked another mom, have you spoken to your daughter about sex? And none of us had. And she had this phrase, 8 is too late. And so as a journalist, I said, let me go and find out what we're supposed to be doing. So that's how I started doing what I'm doing. It started with one little chat in a lounge and then grew into the movement that I have founded. But what I quickly realized is that a lot of our children's sexuality is being shaped online.
True.
And not in a positive way. So I started, the more I researched, the more I read, the more I engaged in the space, the more worried I became of not only the sexual dangers that exist online, but the other dangers as well. And how the digital space was shaping our children's identity.
Yeah. I think for me, And we talk about the fact that online there's series and there's things that you can look up and you kind of start to get quite nervous. I don't have a child as yet, but I can start imagining myself having to try figure out how I can be a nice, healthy parent who lets you go and explore and you figure things out and yourself, but also put boundaries and parameters, because that's the problem with children. They are malleable, and information that goes in also shapes how they start seeing the world. How have you found you engage with the social media, the technological elements, while also trying to make sure that your child feels like they're expressing and enjoying the advances in technology?
I think for me it's about age appropriacy, so giving the appropriate access at the appropriate age. And I think that's something that we are figuring out. It's something that parents didn't know because there wasn't data. So the first generation who've grown up with social media are now going into adulthood. So now we can,
pigs?
yeah, the guinea pigs are now adult guinea pigs. And we can look at that data and go, well, what was the impact? What were some of the negative impacts, and how can we counteract the negative and enhance the positive? And one of the main things that's coming out is don't give access too early.
Okay.
So Jonathan Haidt has just written a book called The Anxious Generation, where he talks about no phones till high school, no social media till 16. So that's quite old if you look at our norms.
Yes.
And he also speaks about phone-free schools, which I'm a massive advocate of. Okay. So for me, the boundaries are age appropriacy. So I agree. I would not give any social media in primary school. Need their brains to catch up. They need to get into that. You know, there's something that happens around the age of 12 or 13 where skepticism becomes an ability.
Yeah, creeps in there.
Yes,
and you start questioning, and you start not necessarily just taking everything in just all face value. Yeah.
And as parents, you're like, suddenly your kids don't believe everything you say anymore, which is a problem. But that's also something that safeguards them online. It's like, is this guy really, you know, is this content really good for me? Is it really something who he says he is? Yeah. So the age appropriacy is one thing that I think is really, really important. And then also just the boundaries, even physical boundaries. So where are you allowing your children to use these devices? Very little kids should always have adults around. They should not have their devices in their bedrooms. Children should never have their devices in their bedrooms overnight.
Sure.
So just those boundaries about where they're using them, that will keep them safe. Because, you know, if you're sitting in the lounge with your granny, you're going to look at different stuff. That if it's late at night, your parents have gone to bed, your brain's not working very well because you're tired.
That's true.
Your friend from school sends you that link, and you're like, dude, click on this link, it's so funny. Yeah. But you know that that's a bit of a dodgy friend.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, you wouldn't click on that next to granny, but with your compromised thinking late at night, you might just do that.
Spiraling into that space. Yeah.
So keeping our kids with those boundaries of where they use it, when they use it, and the age that we give them the access, because it's about us as parents giving them graded access.
Of course. And since you're speaking about kind of age appropriate, if you're having conversations with someone, and of course we always are trying to help people at home to connect the dots, understand how they might broach topics such as this one, how would you start this conversation so that the child doesn't feel like you're taking something away? Or like, I guess in the essence you are taking something away, but they also understand that you as a parent have that responsibility to look after them. And so when they go, oh, but Susan has this, and I feel like I want to be like Susan because I want to be part of this community. How do you start these conversations and make them aware?
Yeah, so that's such a tough one and varies from family to family. But if you start young, it's obviously a lot easier. Yeah. You know, putting the boundaries in early becomes the culture in your home.
Sure.
It becomes how you do it. But then there are some parents that kind of get to a certain age and they think, oh gosh, I didn't put those boundaries in place and I'm worried about my child. Yeah. So that for me, it would be, you know, affirming the child, not making the child feel like they've done something wrong, that you are attacking them, but just helping them understand that it is your job as a parent to keep them safe from possible danger.
Sure.
And that you want to do that with them. And so
yes, have buy-in from them, which makes it more likely it'll go through.
100%. You know, saying I want you to have a good digital experience. I want you to have the most fun without pedophiles having access to you because I care about you. And so here's some of the things I've learned. Here's some of the things I think we need to do on your devices that we're going to put in place. So you might be putting some filtering software on the device.
That's true.
Or you might be saying, you know, I've realized and I've heard some some really good information that we shouldn't have our devices in the bedroom overnight. So the whole family's going to plug in the kitchen, and we're going to put some stuff in place. And to establish those boundaries clearly is very helpful.
Yeah.
So these are the expectations. If you're going to be online, this is the kind of person you need to be. You need to be kind. You need to be the one who stands up against bullies. You need to be taking care of yourself. You know what's good for you. You know what content is helpful. And then what I say to my own children, and a lot of the teens I speak to, is I say to them, when you're watching something, ask yourself the question, who am I becoming by what I'm doing, by what I'm watching? Am I becoming the version of myself that I want to be? Or is it taking me away from that? So for me, the best way to empower young people is an internal navigation tool.
Yeah, that internal locus of control, being able to...
Your values, your vision for your life, who you want to be. But obviously, that's kind of easier with older kids. So I always say to parents, very tight boundaries with little kids, and you loosen them as they show responsibility, maturity, that you feel that they're safe. Sure. You know, some of the ways you can do it, like you're saying, some of the kids might feel left out. So one of the things I suggest to parents is don't give social media in primary school. But if your kid is invited to a party and they need to be added to a WhatsApp group, let the child give your number.
Oh, yes.
But then don't have your name and your picture on your profile. Put the family dog and you know, your surname or something.
So they're still part of that kind of ecosystem, but you have control.
Yeah, and the kids don't even have to know that it's not their phone. You know, and you don't have to check it. And I did this with my own children. My sons didn't really care so much. They were waiting more for Fortnite and stuff like that. They weren't really waiting for chatting.
Of course.
But Emily wanted to chat with friends. And so for her, she would have a couple of chat groups on my phone. I didn't read the messages.
Sure.
They were her little friends, and I didn't feel like she was unsafe, so I didn't need to check them. But they were there, and she was still connected to her friends, but in an age-appropriate way.
I think that's such a beautiful thing, because that's what kids really take away. It's more the principles of something. So the habits that you were talking about, establishing them from a young age, maybe they don't understand why you might be doing, but that habit and the principles that are expounded upon when they're old enough to understand, I think really helps you even later in life. But it's so interesting that you came up with that topic of phone-free schools. And I think that is probably a hot topic to some degree, because people see the utility of a phone at school and then go, well, you could get all of these things that are happening within this space if the kids have it in junior school. But why would you think that phone-free schools would actually benefit far more than give a positive outcome?
So a couple of reasons. So the one is obviously the social aspect. There's a very big boys' high school that I work into, and when I started working there, they had phones. Okay. And then they became a phone-free school while I was there. And before the phone-free policy came, the school was quiet. You'd walk into the classroom, all the boys were on their phones. They'd be walking to class, gaming. At break time, gaming. Yeah. Take away the phones, suddenly all the boys are talking to each other. Yeah. It's a little bit more chaotic. You know, you have to like settle everyone down. You know, there's rowdiness, there's ball games, there's boys being boys. But the phone took that away. And I remember one parent saying her son came to the school in grade 11, and she said, I'm so glad it's a phone-free school. She said, my son is so shy. If he had a phone, he wouldn't talk to anyone.
Oh, yes.
But now he has to. And that is where we developed social skills. So the social aspect is one aspect. The porn is another aspect. Because I think it's something like 40% of kids who are exposed to porn are exposed at school.
Oh, wow. That is a staggering amount.
On other people's devices.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of you're away from parents.
You know, to do the things that they won't allow you to do. You have to venture out.
There's a lot of testosterone. You know, boys kind of, you know, just taking those risks. And so the pornography, and then also the reputation of the school. So the videos in the locker rooms, the videos in the classrooms of kids doing inappropriate things. We've just had Pretoria Girls High. There's some stuff going on with some girls who've been suspended there about videos that were taken in school.
Of course.
So you secure the school's reputation. So there's and actually in Jonathan Haidt's book, one of the things that's happened since the smartphone is a decline in academic performance.
Really?
because of distraction, right?
Of course. I'd imagine since you have all that information, you'd just be consuming it. And
No.
again, that's the kind of argument that somebody might use in terms
Yeah.
of how they think about it rationally.
Yeah.
But in terms of real world application, there's
Yeah.
been a bit of a drop in.
Because most teenagers are not sitting, they finish their work in class. If they're allowed their phone, they're not going on to Encyclopedia Britannica.
Like, oh,
they're going on to
Einstein did.
TikTok,
Yeah. Very true.
Or they're
Very
playing a game on their phone. And so kids rushing through their work so that they can go onto their phone, or distracted from the teacher with their phone under the desk. And so it increases academic performance. And then a lot of the schools because this is very widespread in schools at the moment and gaining traction in South Africa.
Yeah.
And what schools are doing is there's different ways. They lock them away for the day. And then if a teacher wants them for a class, they just get permission for that class. They go and get their phone, they bring it to class, and then they take it back. And so there are ways of using the technology when we need it, but then also giving our children the opportunity to be human.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I think that's the responsibility of all of us as adults, to make sure that you're finding that sweet spot. But speaking from the virtual space, kind of moving into the more physical space, kind of child safety when it comes to the holiday times, because that is when school's out and everybody's doing things together, and that can also be hotspots when it comes to children and their safety. What are some of the things you tell the parents at home to look out for when it comes to large gatherings, parties, be it pens down, matric things that are happening? What are some of the key points to make sure that you are looking after your child's safety?
So with older kids, the single thing that keeps your child the safest is a connected, trusting relationship with your child.
Yeah.
We have a lot of parents now using tracking apps.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about a tracking app is it doesn't keep your child safer.
Really?
Well, because if you wanted to go to a party and I was your mom and I said no, you would just say you're going to your friend's house, leave your phone there and go to the party.
True. That is a young person's sneakiness. Fair enough. Yeah.
Or you just switch it off. Oh, mom, my phone died. But if you and I have a trusting relationship and as a child and a parent we have that and I know where you are. I'm giving you enough age-appropriate freedom. That's what keeps your children safer. Is building that. And with younger kids, I think one of the best things we can do is teach them street smarts.
Yeah. My mother actually used to always tell me I needed to be far more street smart than book smart at times, because life happens to you far more outside the classroom than inside the classroom. And what are those points when it comes to street smarts that you tell, say, your young kids?
So one of the main things is giving them opportunity to make decisions in the real world. So with this fear that a lot of parents are feeling and keeping our children out of the real world, our kids often don't develop stranger danger, for example. So I even say to them, if you're in the spa with your child, let them go to the next aisle and get something and bring it back to you. So they in a shop, Mom, I can't find the pasta. Well, you see that guy who's got the little badge, go and ask him. So teaching them
the points of safety, the people you can engage with. Yeah.
And actually, because anxiety is not the fear of doing hard things, it's the fear of feeling like you can't do hard things. And so I was watching a teenager trying to cross the road the other day, and he was so stressed by it. And I was thinking, I wonder if that's because his parents never let him do it.
Yeah.
So sometimes we have to go, is this a rational fear or is this irrational? So what freedoms can I give my child so that they can create autonomy?
Sure.
So for example, older teens, you're dropping them at a shopping center for the first time. So maybe one of the first things is, okay, you go to the movies, I'm going to shop while you're at the movies. Then they're having their time, but you're close by if they need you.
Of course.
And then, okay, I'm going to drop you. Where you're going to be, I'm going to pick you up. So giving them like the little bits of...
You let them run off, but then they can always come back.
They can always come back.
Yeah.
And even when we're with our little kids is not micromanaging them. So giving them time to conflict resolve with their friends, to use their imagination, to be on their own. So for me, keeping our kids safe a lot is about developing autonomy and a sense of themselves in the world. What are their personal boundaries? What does it feel like when someone's violating your personal boundary? And what do I do about that?
I love, and I think that's probably been like the key thing that we've been speaking about here, because you keep reaffirming it, you keep kind of showing various ways of looking at it, that established bond, that respect that you're there with your child, where you go, okay, I'm trusting you, I'm allowing you to do this and veer out into the world. And the older you get, I guess the leash gets longer, but that at least is something that, as you touched earlier on, that internal locus of control, it really is fleshed out, so they can know when something doesn't feel right because they've had the opportunity to flesh it out. Now, these topics can go on for forever, because children are, sometimes people say a minefield, I say a very complex puzzle, but I always like to say we're connecting dots here, we're trying to make sure that we understand some key points. If you had to tell me, I'm a new parent, I'm trying to figure out all of these nuances and trying to find resources that can help me navigate it, could you give me 3 resources, be it books, be it websites, whatever it may be, that would help me to really be able to synthesize these concepts about rearing children and things to look out for?
Gosh, that is such a big question.
I had to.
That is such a great question.
I also know you're an author, so just
but we don't have
throw
to
yourself in there.
I throw myself in there. So I love literature and I love learning, and there are some great resources out there. Probably, if I think of myself as a parent, probably one of my go-tos is Common Sense Media.
Common Sense Media.
It's a website.
Okay.
Every tech thing that your child might want will be on there. And on there will be reviews by parents, by children, and by experts.
Oh, great.
And so you'll be able to make an educated decision about whether you want your child to have that app, or watch that movie, or read that book,
okay.
or play that game, which is so great, because you do have but my friend's got it. But
all the time.
But let's not be pushed by other people's ways of doing things. Let's go, well, what is good for my family? Sure. And that's a great resource.
Okay.
The other resource I love is a psychologist called Lisa D'Amour. She's written 2 books. Well, she's written multiple books, but the ones I love are The Emotional Life of Teens and Untangled, Getting Girls Through Adolescence. But she has an amazing podcast.
Okay, Lisa D'Amour.
So she's a psychologist. She just looks at the psychology of parenting, and that's what her podcast is called.
Wow.
The Psychology of Parenting. Love, love,
Probably
love.
one of you. This one's a great one. If you have time, go across to Lisa's.
But only second option, eh?
Number two.
No, she's great, and she tackles very relevant topics. Should I track my child?
Sure. Engage with that topic just with them as well. Yeah.
Or is my kid gaming too much? And it's not just technology. She talks about bullying. She talks about toxic relationships. Wow. All sorts of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the third one?
Well, I have written a few books.
David, that's what I was waiting for. So now if you could please, the one that you think they should start with, the one that would really usher them into this experience and trying to figure it out.
So I think possibly is the book that I've just released, which is called What Just Happened. And it's a puberty survival guide for young people.
Oh, wow.
Because it's never been more complicated to be an adolescent. It's never been harder to go through puberty. I mean, puberty sucks for everyone, I think.
Listen, if I remember correctly, it was not a fun time. Sometimes fun, but mostly just chaotic and confusing.
And that's why I call the book What Just Happened. Like, what just happened to my body? What just happened to my brain? Why am I suddenly attracted to that person who I hated yesterday? Like, what the heck? So the reason I wrote that book is it's called a puberty survival guide, because it's like, okay, this is happening. Why is this happening? Sure. So it's a book that it's written for young people, but a resource for parents as well.
Of course.
But just to give real practical handles of how to thrive as a child growing up now.
Thank you, Christy. There you have it. There are your resources. And honestly, it's probably one of the more difficult things to try and engage with, because of how technology is always progressing, and you also are having to make sure you understand, and it can become a bit of a whirlwind, but there are your anchors. 3 incredible resources. It's been another Medshield Movement Connect show with me, Dr. Fez. Christy, thank you for sitting down with us. I'm hoping when I have a kid, I'll be able to navigate it. Fingers crossed.
I'm sure you will. I'll be here if you need help.
Thank you. That's what I was waiting for.